All right.
Welcome back to another podcast wherein Jonathan and I sit near the end of near the end of the massage table and talk about a little bit more of like the philosophical kind of end of body work. Kind of the questions that we get asked at workshops and this is definitely today's topic is navigating asymmetry. Which I think is a really, really important topic to bring out in the world of structural integration and integrative bodywork, where ideal posture is this thing that is, put on a pedestal to be worshipped and always
upon the mountaintop.
I just feel like it's really important. We both feel it's very important to bring up the fact that that is just one tool. Granted, it's an important tool. It gives us lots of good information, but it is just a tool to get at how we can make this individual function better. Make them more comfortable in themselves, make them more comfortable to do the movements they want to do. There's a quote from Judith Aston, and apologies from us if we butchered it, but my memory of the quote is balance is the successful navigation of asymmetry.
Right.
I remember when I heard that quote, I was in SI school, I was at KMI, and that the concept that sort of all this like ideal postural stuff that we're spending all this time learning and practicing on is, sort of like it just took the weight of it off significantly. In the sense of like, hey, if I don't get this tibia to shift around in just so, if I don't get the hip to sit just so, it's not the end of the postural world, of this client.
Posture apocalypse, I believe it's referred to as. I'm not sure on that.
And I do remember one of my instructors at one point, was asked by one of the students in the class, so when did it happen for you? When was the moment where you, like, your alignment just kicked in and everything was perfect from there on out? And she was like, oh yeah, it was like April 23rd, 2003. And she was like, no, I'm still daily dealing with, all the different things that happen. There's so many things that influence our posture, just from our movement history, psychology, there's,
all the activities of the day.
There's so many different things. And then, age starts to become a factor. The time we've lived with injuries. It's a constant. I think you always use the term of the yin yang.
It is.
If I'm saying that correctly. It's like we're always a little shifted off of one end, and our goal is to try to notice how it's shifted off as best we can. Our goal as therapists,
of course,
and to kind of just try to nudge it back in a direction where there is a little bit more balance.
I mean, we use posture as the reference, and I feel like somehow the reference has been translated into the gold standard of body work.
Well said.
I'm using posture as to clues for patterns that may be contributing to either this client's complaints or clearly what seems to be an area of dysfunction that may be influencing the whole. It's not the end-all be-all. And in fact, even the reference that we use in terms of anatomical position, how many people do you see in your days walking around in that perfect posture? It just doesn't exist. Although I will say this, as we sat down to start this podcast, I really started adjusting my sitting posture. I was like, hey, what's going on? Oh, let me get upright. Am I
hinging well from my hip?
Exactly. Where is my pelvis? So I think the consciousness of it, again, in the sense of using it as that reference, but it's a Sisyphusian task. You're never going to get there. I'm never going to get there. I worked with 2 Pilates instructors, maybe somewhere about my 4th year in practice, and they were attempting to achieve perfect posture. And I was like, what are you doing in your sleep? And they're like, do you mean what, like, how am I sleeping? Right.
I'm like, no. I never thought about that.
I'm like, how are you addressing this issue while you're in the right? And that's exactly where it got to. I think what's really important, and I think Alex and I agree on this 100%, and we talk a lot about this, I think what we'd like you to start really dialing into is that when we talk about balance, we're really talking about functionality.
Yeah.
And clearly, again, there are so many variables that go into functionality for a singular human being. Muscular, musculoskeletal, fascial, nervous system. Alex listed a ton of things that get in the way of that. It's a guide. It's north on my compass, but nobody goes from point A to point B in that direct fashion. It's not obtainable in that way. And I think ultimately, I do see it getting in people's way of doing really good work because they're so afraid that if I change this, I don't know what's going to happen to that. Or yes,
the whole thing's going to topple over.
That's the way to say it.
Again, I think it's one of the things I've learned the most about, that I've come to appreciate the most with doing this work, is not so much like how badly the body breaks down, but more how incredible it is at keeping one foot in front of the other. So even if you unbalance somebody,
I'm so glad you said that.
There's plenty of opportunities to unbalance structure as you start to really interface with it, and there's going to be those moments when you realize, oh, that spinal curvature probably needed to be there. That was part of their normal.
Right.
And I assumed that they should be taller and lean, longer.
Yeah.
There should be less curvature in this direction, so I tried to correct that. And it created all kinds of problems. I feel like in this, the concepts in this podcast are not so much as sort of like clear question answer type thing where
that's I was really thinking
okay,
that.
well, what do I do with this is great, but what do I do with it? I think the important thing is just to simply start asking the question. Is this about creating ideal posture? Why are we wanting to create ideal posture here? Is this helping their functionality?
Yes.
Is this spinal curvature normal for this client?
Right.
Maybe you've got a client with a short femur. I have plenty of clients with we've
actual bone
length. We have measured it, and they really do have one femur shorter than the other. We're never going to get rid of their hip tilt.
Yeah.
And so there's a sense of, how do we balance them best around that? Is it just that they're always going to want to compact over to one side, and so we just need to do a lot more lifting across that side to make sure they don't get stuck there? It's one thing to be there, it's another when you can't get out of there. So I think for me, there's a lot of a sense of working when I work with asymmetry, there's a sense of how can we keep things mobile so that they don't get pulled. If this becomes the new normal, they can't get out of this, then every movement they do, everything they learn is going to be based off of this position as neutral.
Right. That's a good point.
And then it's going to get even more, it's going to just pull down more and more and more into that pattern. And we want to push it out of that patterning as much as we can.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to ask ourselves, why do we want this ideal posture?
Why?
And I definitely, I see this, coming from clients. I see this a lot. This almost obsession with having perfect posture, with getting everything to line up just for the sake of things lining up. And I go through the questionnaire of sort of like, okay, well, how is this? How are you noticing issues with your gait, with standing, with your what you're doing? And it's like, well, no, this the ribs they don't line up, and I want this to, I like this to sit better. And at that moment, it's sort of like we have a bit of more of a conversation of we've done all this work to free up the rib cage. As far as I can tell, there's no significant restrictions going on there. I've seen a lot of variation in human anatomy over the years.
That's another,
and not just in body work, but in the cadaver labs too. And you get, I think when you see enough variation, you start to realize it gives you perspective that correcting that one little thing that seems to be off, it's just not as important as it might have been in my earlier career. But I want to flip that over to the other side. Because
please.
As clients, we have this desire sometimes to be ideally straight, but as therapists, we can get in our own way because we get very much dialed into this sense of, I want that to line up for the sake of lining up. You have to ask yourself too in that moment. I ask myself all the time because I'm somebody, I'm drawn to this field. I'm drawn to things like woodworking and lutherie and stuff like this because it is all about lining things up and being very precise. And I feed off of that. But there's a sense of, when can I have that? Like when I'm lining up a guitar neck.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Use that that part of your personality. But when I'm doing
Right.
body work, I have to sort of acknowledge that and then let that go, and really look more at, is this change, this like subtle shift in their rib cage, something that I want to have happen just because I have this ideal of that's where it should be?
Yep.
Or am I doing this because it's going to improve the client's functionality? Because it's going to help them walk better, stand better, breathe better, move better.
Yep.
And there's been plenty of times where I've just had to, walk away from something because it's like, I can't get this to shift. I can't get this to move. And it's like, maybe it doesn't need to move, Alex.
Right.
Maybe they're going to be just fine without that sitting where you think it should be sitting.
Yeah, and maybe to tie it back into originally in the sense of the clues, even the post-session assessment, I think the questions that I'm asking, and sometimes out loud, because again, most of my clients do have a sense of this, maybe not in the vernacular or the terminology, but I'm like, do those details that I still see in this postural situation, is this about resolution or an unresolved, are there pieces of that are these details now that, because I cleared off the bigger slate, I see a little better? Is this me, again, obsessing on an idea that's never going to get anywhere? The other thing that sort of kicked into my head too, because I've had this conversation with a couple of students, I also have to remember that they have to go out and live in this scenario for a little bit, for the good and the bad of it. Okay, maybe they settle even further post-session. Maybe the central peripheral nervous system had to take some time to process this new information. Maybe they will look fantastic an hour from now, which isn't me just waving a cookie in front of me knowing that perfect posture is out there somewhere, Jonathan. You'll see it one day.
It's out there. It's not in here.
No, it's definitely not. But I do think, again, in terms of maybe I think Alex just said it in terms of really breaking it down to what are our goals? And is my own desire, again, even if it is resolution for a session, listen, I might not be able to do this all in one session or 3 sessions. I have to be all right with that. I just showed up to this party. I can't tell you what happened 5 years before this has been going on. So the same with posture. Maybe I just need to, take a step back in a way and let it be all right and reevaluate where my client comes in next time with, hey, did this feel better? Are you moving better? What are you noticing now that we made these changes? That's really more, I think, where my head needs to be at most of the time. So
I definitely find, there's a variety of techniques that I use, just, that I know from all the things that I've been through. But there's a sense of occasionally choosing techniques, like if I'm doing a lot of very directed techniques where I'm trying to move tissue in a particular direction to correct a specific thing. There's a tendency to get really locked into that idea, that obsessive need to get everything to line up and to push it where it's supposed to be, of directing. And I think it's important, and I try to really bring in techniques that are more about being with structure. And I'm thinking more about like the myofascial release type techniques that I've learned, where you just basically hang out with the, like on either side of the pelvis or on either side of the diaphragm or something like that. Where it's not about moving tissue in any specific direction. It's just about being present with it. So, I might do a bunch of directing techniques to try to get the change that I think, to get the anterior tilt to shift, because, it really is an issue and it pulls the low back and it creates some problems. But also just simply listen to what's going on in the structure, either before or after or sometime during it, so that it just takes me out of that directing, obsessive, like ideal posture kind of mindset into a all right, well, what is this tissue really, how is this tissue responding? I will definitely notice things that I did not pick up because I was too focused on the moving of the tissue, not about it's like I lost touch with listening to the tissue. So I've seen a lot of change happen that way too, where it's like, wow, I guess I don't need to smush the tissue around, because that literally, I could feel it resolve. I could feel that inflare opening as that iliacus released, and I didn't even really push on it. I was just hanging out there, and that directed the client's energy or focus or whatever to the area, and that helped it let go. It may not get rid of like a fixation if there's something really fundamentally holding it or a
Right.
vertebra that's tied to it. But nonetheless, I just think that's one practical, like
Yeah.
like something I can give you in this moment to be, instead of just a philosophical kind of like, oh, think about this concept more. But try a specific technique like that where if you find yourself really stuck into the obsessive need to push tissue and move it around and line everything up,
Right.
to just simply take a technique where you're just quietly sort of listening to the structure and feeling where it needs to go and where it goes as it releases.
Yes. Yeah.
That will give you a different insight, and I think shift the place that you're at mentally. At least it does for me. So
Yeah.
If I can share that with you and have other people benefit from that too, and have in that moment of getting caught.
It's so funny because, again, in terms of, I really fully believe in the organic moments of learning and how powerful they are. And I think I may have just had one of those amidst listening to Alex here, which A, is why I'm constantly hanging out with this guy. But B, for all of you out there who feel like there's an end point to this, there's not, in the sense of there's always other thoughts to be had. And what Alex said, and maybe this is in it and maybe I'm just playing it out in the moment, but Alex talked about dealing with specific tissue, the anterior tilt of the pelvis, and I think maybe there's a little bit of ego in all of it, in the sense that, I was trying to be gentle with everybody, including myself.
Maybe.
My ego's tied up, or the thought that if I do A, then B should happen. And I talk a lot about it with, again, client processing and stuff, but I didn't think about it in the way that you just said it. And it really kicks in. It's the smallest space to think, I'm doing this to correct that. That didn't correct. I must have screwed this up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm not worth it. All those things that maybe are underneath this in a deeper sense. And I had not thought about that when we sat down, and something in that phrase really cued in this other level of, oh yeah, I'm goal-oriented, but yet I have to be open, like Alex just said, A, to the possibility that this isn't going to work, or B, it just isn't what it needs. It just needs to be sat with and understood, much like us as human beings. So that feels like a pretty good place, right, to wrap it on up. Yeah, no, that was a really good conversation. I'm glad we had that one. I hope you all enjoyed it. We'll be out there soon with brand new second edition textbooks. Hopefully we'll be back with some classes live and in person, and we are working to get some stuff up online. So we thank you for your time. We love having these conversations from either end of the massage table.
Yeah, take care of yourselves.
Stay integrated.